First, we're going to get into the game recaps this past weekend of the Alliance football. I want to first start out with the Memphis Express and the Atlanta Legends. The game that I considered last week as the premier game of the week. The two considered worst teams in the Alliance go head-to-head. A duel of old SEC quarterbacks in Zach Mittenberger and Aaron Murray. The final score was 23-20 Atlanta, which that gave Atlanta a big push after starting off very slow at 0-3 and coming in and winning the past two games. Memphis gave them a fight, though. Memphis fought and fought and fought. They were in the lead for most of the game, but Atlanta ended up coming back and winning it. We saw a lot of good play out of the wide receivers and running backs in that game, but ultimately, I think this game proved that these two teams can really dish it out. The defense really wasn't there that much, but it did show parts of the game. The score shows itself, 23-20. Offenses were doing very well. Aaron and Zach, respectively, threw great passes throughout the game. The running backs put their fair share into it. There was a great screenplay by Memphis that included Beatty. Zach was looking to the left, faking out the defense, and then throwing it right to Beatty, and Beatty just took it all the way up the sideline, and he finished the rest. Now, I want to throw it over to John. He was actually at the game, so he's going to give you a little bit of his thoughts, along with talking about the Orlando-Birmingham game. John?
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. And yes, I was at the game. That stadium is a very nice stadium. Crowd was energetic. It was not a very big crowd. I talked to some people next to me and in my section in general. One guy right next to me said that there was an MLS game that started about 45 minutes in the city after this game started, so that had to do with the short crowd. He also said that most people don't even know the league exists. Most people don't even know that his own city has a team still. So they got a lot of work to do as far as spreading the word to their own community, as far as the fact that they do business. But as for the game is concerned, it was a competitive game, back and forth game. A lot of big plays I saw. The defense looked to be ahead of the offense for the most part. Aaron Murray, in my opinion, justified once again why he should be the starting quarterback there. Now he's got 1.5 wins under his belt there. Memphis, they're a tough ball team. I sat on their side of the field. Singletary's a very good coach. Their coordinators are very good, interactive with the players. They just don't make the right tackles when it matters, and they just don't capitalize on the turnovers when it matters, at certain points in the game. And I think that was the dagger for them. They had ample opportunities to win that game, and they shipped it. As far as Atlanta's concerned, this is one of the cases where they beat a team that they should have beat. In their home stadium. It's good for 3 points in the big leagues. Well, it's good for 3 points in this league too, because the final score was 23. Give the home team 3, and that's what they win by. And they look good. And I said it the moment that Murray came in last week and led his team to a first drive touchdown. As soon as he took the field, the team looked like it took a whole new complexion under him. And that has continued through this week. So good game for them. Both played well. Like I said, short crowd, but, they got a lot of work to do in Atlanta as far as, alerting their local fans that they actually play football on a professional level there. People just still don't know it, but great tailgating atmosphere. So I expect, as nice as that stadium is, once people start showing up, that is going to be a really nice place to see a football game.
All righty, and give us your thoughts on the Orlando and Birmingham game as well.
Well, that was game one yesterday. Very big crowd. I thought I saw 15 to 20,000. I don't know exactly what the number was. I think somebody came along later in the evening and said 13 and some change. It seemed like more than that to me. Very energetic people out there pre-game, tailgating. They are very happy to have a team in Birmingham. They're very pleased with the performance of their team. What I noticed about Orlando, and this is the biggest thing that I noticed, okay, when the offense or defense was on the field, I saw all of the teams, all the levels of the teams that were on the bench sitting together, meaning if the defense was out there on the field, then I saw the linemen sitting together on one bench talking. I saw the quarterbacks talking with the quarterbacks coaches and the wide receivers. I saw the running backs together with the running backs coach. They look like a very in sync ball team. This Orlando Apollo's team, and I did not see that on the sideline with Birmingham, nor have I seen it with any of the other teams around the league. So I think number one, Coach Spurrier is just ahead of the curve as far as preparing and having his team, than the other teams in the league. But as far as the gameplay goes, you know, they shot out of the Roman candle early. Orlando, they scored quick. Birmingham was just not able to keep up with the firepower. I kind of said to some people next to me, I said, well, Birmingham's been a second half team this year so far. They're built on running game and defense. They pulled Murray, not Murray. They pulled Perez probably a little too late. Number 8 came in and played well. Price was right. He was able to put a couple scores on the board for them. He looks good. Probably going to stick with him moving forward here. I also, while I was in the stadium, I kind of looked it up. 2 linemen been banged up. Starting tight end to start the season banged up. Starting number 1 corner banged up. So you get a little skinny guy like Perez running around. I mean, what is he, 175 pounds soaking wet in lead boots, with dinged up lineman and the number 1 blocker, tight end out. Well, riddle me this, Batman. Them little quarterbacks don't do too well under those circumstances. So especially if you're playing the Steve Spurrier-led Orlando Apollos, which I just said, they're just a better team. On the last note of that game, all those Birmingham Iron players had no problems at all signing autographs for little kids coming out of the stadium at the end of the game before they headed to their cars. Not one of them seemed to be in a rush to move past the crowd. They all, grabbed sharp jerseys for those kids. And it was really nice to see because I remember how it used to feel waiting for, my local sports teams and baseball, football, whatever sport I was watching, try to get that autograph. That's one of the happiest moments in a kid's life. I got so-and-so's autograph. And that's their hero. And they signed a lot. And it looks like they love their community down there. I got to speak to one that's from my area, went to Maryland. And he's happy to play there, happy to be there, loves the city. It was truly a great atmosphere, and people do love the fact that they have a team. Saw some tornado damage, and I thought that, still windy, still possibility of rain. We're going to be a small crowd. Came out and drove. It was a very good atmosphere and a good game.
Well, thank you, John. That was very informative. Now, let's go over to Michael. He's going to tell us about the San Diego Fleet and Salt Lake Stallions game.
Oh, thank you, Kevin, by the way. The biggest thing that I took from the Salt Lake City and San Diego game was Salt Lake City is a way better team than I think a lot of people are giving them credit for. I think that they've just missed on certain opportunities. And as I was watching the San Diego game, I was seeing a lot of the mistakes that a lot of the Stallions have had. Outside of Pearson L., Josh Woodrum hasn't really received a lot of help from his receivers. A couple of drops here, a couple of drops there on key third down, key first down drives that would have kept the drive going. And San Diego proved to me that they're a lot tougher team than some people might be giving them credit for. They lost Philip Nelson, who would turn that team around at the quarterback position to a collarbone injury. He's out 4 to 6 weeks in the game last week. And they turned, over to Mike Bercovici. And, Bercovici had a little bit of a rebound game this week. I don't think that it was necessarily a stellar performance, but I think it was enough to, move the ball to get it downfield and bring them back from behind after a late touchdown by the Stallions. I think that the two biggest distinctions between Nelson and Bercovici for the Fleet moving forward is Bercovici's a lot more athletic. He extends plays, but his pocket awareness isn't quite to the level of Nelson, and I think that's very key in a Mike Martz type system. And it showed, in the middle half of that game when the fleet sort of started losing traction and the Stallions started coming back. But no, the game was, to me, was the game of the week. Woodrum is easily the most underrated quarterback, I think, in the AAF. I don't think enough people are talking about him because the Stallions are literally, a Woodrum injury away from possibly being at the top of the West, tied in the three-way tie with San Antonio and San Diego. So, I just think that the Fleet are a lot better team, well-rounded than people are giving them credit for. And even though the Stallions are 1-4, I think that team could very easily be 3-2.
Definitely. I know coming into this year in this league, the Stallions were considered to be the worst. They were considered to be the underdog. But any game they go into, their record might not show it, but they fight and they push these teams to be better. And when these teams beat them, they're not beating them because Salt Lake's bad. They're beating them because they need to be better.
Just one more thing, Kevin, before you move on. Brandon Oliver was also out for the Stallions, which I think made a huge difference in that game as well.
Definitely. Well, with Woodrum and Brandon, I mean, this team, I feel like even though this year they're a little bit on the bad side with being 1-4, I think if they're around next year, the Stallions will prove to be something a little bit more fighting them. Now, going over to coach and talking about the game that just ended with the San Antonio Commanders and the Arizona Hotshots. Give us your thoughts.
Another good late night game, another good close late night game for the league, and I think that's always going to be beneficial. Moving forward, talking about the game, the Commanders just showed the balance that I think that they have offensively. And Logan Woodside with the rushing game of Kenneth Farrow and Mikhail McKay show a lot of balance in their offense. Arizona's problem today was they did some nice things, but at the end of the day, they turned over the football, and that's basically what cost them the football game.
Definitely. Now, I ended up watching. The game was really good, in my opinion. After halftime, Arizona came in and they started pounding and pounding and pounding. They got that onside kick, or well, not a kick, but the onside recovery. But then the receiver ended up fumbling the ball, giving it to San Antonio. I want to get your thoughts because this was a point the commentators were trying to make. Do you think that forward progress should have been stopped at the line, or do you think the call was good?
I actually thought progress was stopped. I did agree with Marvin Lewis. He was relatively adamant on the same thing, that progress was stopped. That's a call that you really have to jump on. You can't let the defenders continue to rip at the football to pull it out when the runner is not moving, and that's pretty much what the case was. But again, what I was talking about with John, because I was asking him if he happened to see that play, which he didn't. It was just interesting that the struggle for the additional 4 or 5 yards after the first downs, and something bad happened and cost him.
Definitely, it was really interesting because that play really turned it, because they should have had that, and he was stopped there for a good 10-20 seconds, and in the NFL usually that would have been called. But I think the issue was because he had one foot available, the other one he was just prying to get away. So I think that's why they didn't call it. But I was agreeing with Marvin. I thought forward progress should have been there as well. But I will say this: that game was really interesting at the ladder, and I feel so bad for number 32 for San Antonio. I can't remember his name, but he got an interception earlier in the game and returned it back for a touchdown, and then got 2 interceptions on that last drive, that last Arizona touchdown, but they were both called back, one for defensive holding and the other one for pass interference. And I felt really bad for him because that was 2 great interceptions, but they never got him to him. But moving on, we're going to talk about something we've been kind of talking about for the past couple of weeks on this show with Alliance. We see that the viewership is going down. We don't see relatively that many fans in the stadiums. And it kind of, at least I think, goes to how spring football leagues usually don't work. We saw how it happened early in the 2000s with the XFL. They were around for a short amount of time and then it just died out. And now we're looking at Alliance. The first week was really good, but ever since then, the viewership and the fans have been going down. Granted, we have these teams going out in their communities every now and then. They're pushing it out, but there's still a lot of people that don't know. So I kind of want to get everyone's thoughts on this. I'm going to start with Michael. Why do you think spring leagues just don't work?
Well, I think the spring leagues in the past haven't worked because they haven't been transparent per se with like the talent level and the amount of quality play that they're going to be putting out. I think that you've had a few leagues, have been semi-honest about it, but for the most part, that they've really tried going on and being like a springtime NFL instead of starting with the smaller scale stuff like we're seeing now with the AAF and the patient side of things too, like with the XFL 2020 that's coming out next year. But I think one of the biggest things is the NFL has a lot of casual fans. They have a lot of fans that aren't football fans first. They're team fans first. So you go to Atlanta, you get a lot of Falcons fans. They're Falcons fans. They're not necessarily NFL fans. They're not going to sit down and watch the Tennessee Titans and the Cincinnati Bengals game. But the Falcons play, they're there. They're watching it, whether they're at the stadium or they're at a bar or they're at home throwing a barbecue, they're watching it. And I think that with spring leagues, you don't have that camaraderie yet. I think especially with the AAF, you got to start small. You have to be honest and open to your fan base, and you're going to get those hardcore fans. You're going to get the guys like us, like John, going to 2 games in the weekend that are going to try to, spread the word and be like, hey, check it out. You may not recognize the players, but you may be impressed. That Salt Lake City San Diego game that happened on Saturday night is probably on par with any NFL game that happened last year. But some people are going to miss that because they're not going to recognize certain players. They're not going to get a chance to necessarily sit down. So I think that, like, John was saying about the Atlanta game tonight, like they got to really get out there. And we've touched base on it before on the show where, it's a community team. They have to go out and do the work, get the people out there and really get these people excited. And then eventually those casual fans will come along once some of these players start becoming more household names.
Definitely. The thing is, you have all these players in this league, and they're from the NFL. They're from the colleges that you used to watch, but it's because they weren't household names in college or in the NFL that it's making it hard. But with the way that the talent is built around it, the talent is really good. Even though they're not in the NFL, and the reason for them being in the AAF is because they couldn't make it per se, they show off a lot. You got guys like Trent Richardson in there, and you got guys like Zach Mettenberger and Aaron Murray. These guys are veterans. They've had years in the NFL, and they're back trying to show their worth. And then you got young guys that have had maybe a year, like Greg Ward Jr. with San Antonio. He was a quarterback at Houston, now a wide receiver, and he had it 1 year, didn't really work out. Now he's over here and he's actually making plays. But then you have guys like McKay. I didn't know who he was. I think Michael, you're the one in week 1 when I brought him up, you knew who he was. But you got guys like that people know of, but they're not really household names, so not everyone does. So, John, what do you think? Why do you think these spring leagues just don't work out? Could it be maybe because of the other sports, or is it just because it's the spring?
Well, I talked to at the Birmingham game while I was watching the players, waiting for them to trickle out 1 by 1, 2 by 2, and sign autographs for the kids. There was a lifer of an Alabama football fan in general there, and we talked football. We talked Birmingham football. I mean, this guy loves everything about Alabama football. They were so happy to have a team back there in Birmingham, and I think it kind of showed for that particular week. And even him as a lifer, he described football being a way of life in the state of Alabama and in Birmingham, and we talked about how it's been in other places that we have been, and I told him, well, that's kind of how hockey is in Detroit. It's a religion. And football is that way in Alabama, and they're going to support that team, the Iron, down there. I think the television ratings have been pretty steady. Atlanta is a big city, a big transitional city. It's kind of like the city I live in, Washington, D.C., where they don't have a lot of people that are actually born and raised there in Atlanta. Everybody's transplanted from somebody somewhere else, and they're there for tech reasons, or they're there for, whatever various job reasons that they do. And sports are not, on the top of everybody's priority list. But with that being said, you've got the Braves and you've got the MLS team in town, playing simultaneously. And if they're not even going to send a mailer out, to let you know that they're in business and playing games in the city of Atlanta, well, you can't just depend on BR Live to let everybody know that you're playing football games, because nobody knows what BR Live is or knows where to find it if they did. So they've got a little bit of work to do. I think year 2 is going to be a big year for marketing. With the XFL coming along, it's a golden opportunity for them to say, we're coming back. We're not one and done. Here we are. We've got some competition across the street there, but our lemonade stand is still open. Okay. I talked to another guy that is in a discussion group. We got the tailgate after the game here in Atlanta, and him and his brother were at the game. They got their tickets through they got their tickets for $5, 15 rows off the field. Not that I'm jealous. I was sitting on the 50, but $5. They got them through buying something from some store. I think some grocery store had a coupon or something like that, or buy 12 packs of sodas, get an Atlanta Legends ticket for $5. So that they were able to take advantage of that. But I don't think enough people know, about the team, let alone the deals and stuff like that. So the league's got some work to do. In the league's defense, in a startup, you don't pour all your money into marketing in year 1. You probably go out of business quick doing something like that, because timing is everything with marketing and airing commercials and things like that. And you can spend a whole boatload of money on a commercial, and if nobody sees it, well, hell, it's like a tree falling in the woods and nobody being around. Does it make any noise? So, I think year 2 will be big. We've been relatively steady, barring some storms and things like that. I think, I don't know what the Hot Shots attendance was for tonight. They haven't been so hot in that category. Atlanta wasn't very good, but the other 2 games, I think, had pretty good attendance, and I expect it to gradually climb. So, with that being said, they do have a little bit of work to do, but they have a nice little steady following. And I will say this: I missed out saying this. I arrived last night in Atlanta, and the first thing I did was look for a bar. Okay, and people are just as confused about where to get a drink in Atlanta as they are about whether or not they actually have a spring football team. But I did find a bar, and the 2 bartenders dealt with me in a professional manner. I'm very difficult to deal with. I'm a very type A guy, very friendly, but so on and so forth. They didn't know anything about the league. And these are 2 guys with personalities that deal with customers every day, and they were explosive in their personalities. They had never heard of the Alliance. And they asked us questions. Oh, well, how is it? How are the rules? The same as the NFL. How many teams are there? Where are the teams? So I'm sitting here educating 2 popular bartenders in the city of Atlanta, and they didn't even know that there was a league here, let alone that we were in town to see the game. So, like I said, they got some work to do. They got some catching up to do in that regards. But I think they will improve.
Definitely. And now, Coach, over to you. It's just a big topic that I thought of, and that I know we've all talked about in our private discussions and everything. I thought we'd bring it onto the show. So, Coach, give me your thoughts on why you think the spring leagues just don't work.
Well, I mean, this one's still kind of up for grabs, whether it's working or not. I've been a big proponent that, the stadiums, they're just in too big of stadiums. You can't sell developmental football in such huge stadiums. And then also, too, I think you have to find the right balance of games, and I don't know if it's 6 games, 8 games, or 10 games. So it's something that's exciting, for a hot minute when we want a little bit more football. What ultimately ends up happening is you run into the NBA, late NBA, NHL, March Madness, and the NCAA just takes over at a point in time. So you really have to find a way to balance your product. Now, John touches on a lot of things, and we see this at the minor league level so many times. Lack of marketing, I mean, particularly in a city like Atlanta. Why is this going on where people don't know what's going on with this team? So you have to find the right balance of games. I think 8 to 10 is really it. Make it exciting, make it hot. Play it in smaller stadiums. I'd rather see 10,000 people in a 15 or 12,000 seat stadium than in a 30 or 40 seated stadium. And then make sure that you have scheduling flexibility, that you are around when maybe some of the other big boys aren't, and March Madness, and again, the NBA playoffs and the NHL, NHL and NBA are going to June. So you've got some work to do there, but it all comes down to marketing and an effective plan, and there's not enough of that.
Very true. I think the marketing is really big. You touched on a point where you said that you rather see 10,000 in a smaller stadium instead of having them in these like 30,000, 40,000 seat stadiums. Do you think, just to see, do you think that if these teams were to play the day after, say, a high school football game and kind of promote it through that, you think the community would get behind it more if they played where their favorite high school plays? Or do you think it's just because they just don't market too much?
Well, high school stadiums vary from state to state, so you can find probably an ideal high school in the state of Texas and, several other states like I'm talking about. But there's plenty of college and universities, that can handle that number within a state and close to these areas where they have these teams. Again, like I said, it's just tough to play in these big stadiums and market developmental football. And at the end of the day, does developmental football really draw the same as the big boys do? No, it probably doesn't. So let's find that happy balance, that happy medium. That's also going to allow these leagues to keep their ticket costs and hopefully concessions and parking and those things down too, because the only way these minor league sports, developmental sports, whatever you want to call them, the only way that they make it is if a family of four, or a father and son, or single parents can take their kids out and they can afford to take them out and have a good time.
Definitely. You've all kind of made some good points that I'm going to try to touch on, but I look at it, it's like we have the latter half of the NBA going straight into the playoffs. You have March Madness with the NCAA, and these teams are going back and forth in college, and everyone loves March Madness. It's the biggest thing in the spring. You have NASCAR, you have the big boys where you have the Truck Series on Fridays or even Thursdays, and then you have the Busch Series, and then the Monster Energy Series, and you have baseball coming around. You have all these AA and AAA teams, and even the big leagues, they're playing in different states getting ready for the opening day. So the attendance can be looked at as either not marketing or just everyone's somewhere else to a different sport. You look at how the XFL is doing everything. They pitched this last year, way before they even decided to start naming names. They were just like, hey, we're bringing this back. And they've been marketing it and marketing it and marketing it. Now we're getting teams, we're getting coaches, we're getting general managers throughout months and weeks, and everyone's just looking at it as it's good to talk about. Like, everyone thinks this is going to work. It's like, John, you posted something in the XFL and AAF discussion group. It was a photo of the tier 1 players, tier 2 players, and everything like that, where it would be like these high-end players would get like a certain amount of spots and all this. The XFL, if they're pushing it like that, that could be completely false. That could just be something that they're throwing out there and getting people. It's just like, oh, that's really interesting. But then you have the actual reports coming out and being like, oh, we're gonna pay players this much. This is who we're looking for. It's like, I believe it was a couple of weeks ago, the XFL came out and stated that they're looking for lower tier NFL players to come in and play with them, other than just like the people that are older or the people that kind of flunked out and they haven't been around for years upon years, not just the guys in the AAF. You got people like Johnny Manziel that are just like, yeah, I've been looking at the XFL and the Alliance. So XFL is doing something that Alliance didn't. Alliance just came in. I didn't find out that the Alliance was going to be a thing until I was told by a friend of mine. But I think the marketing, the community aspect of it, we only have 8 teams. Or not 8 teams, 4 teams, my bad. You have, oh no, it is 8. It is 8, my bad. I'm kind of losing my train of thought. But we have these 8 teams. We have them in San Antonio, Atlanta, Orlando, Birmingham, San Diego, Salt Lake. I'm losing it. I can't figure out the 8th one now. Arizona, my bad. But you have these 8 teams. You have San Diego, who doesn't have a professional team at all. You have Birmingham, who doesn't have a professional team at all. Orlando. Those 3 state or communities are very big in the college part of it. Lesser with San Diego or San Antonio. San Antonio has this very much clear cut. They want a team. They want it. Now they have it, and San Antonio is actually pushing it, I believe. But you look at Orlando, they have the Magic, who isn't really doing well in the NBA, and now they have UCF, and the Knights are pushing it. They went undefeated and claimed as they proclaimed national champions for a year, and then they bring the Apollos in, and Orlando's losing their minds because it's like, oh, finally we have a big team. And then Birmingham, like John said when he was at the game, and how he just said, football centric everywhere. You have Auburn, you have Alabama, you have a team in UAB that came back last year and actually pushed the boundaries and wanted this team to stay, because they weren't in the college scene for a year or two because they actually ended up cutting their football program. But then they brought it back, and everyone lost their minds in Alabama because they enjoyed UAB football. So that's a very high football state. But now they have a professional one, and like John said, they love it. The atmosphere is great there. So these spring leagues, I don't see why they don't work. But as long as they're done right, I feel like they can. John, you have any thoughts? I see you're over there.
Yeah, one thing I will say, I forgot to mention this earlier when I was actually talking about the game, but the older guy that I was talking to after the game, we had a nice long conversation. I ended up giving him some pulled pork and chili that we made entire crock pot of here after our conversation. It was a great conversation. And one of the things that we talked about was, attendance and how do we improve it, and what do you think they should do to grow, and so on and so forth. And he said, I'll tell you what, the same people that are coming to this game today, that you saw at this game today, if they're over 30, they were here the last time they had a semi-professional football league here, and I think it was a WLF or something, WFL or whatever. And he said he saw every game of the original XFL, the Birmingham Bolts or whatever they were at that time. This guy supports anything that comes remotely within the stratosphere of Birmingham football, and so does everybody else down there. So, but what I also said was, I questioned him. I said, well, some people, we talk about maybe pushing the league back a month. How about they start in March? We saw what happened in the snow over there. Steve Spurrier didn't have a problem coaching in it. He was able to walk into Salt Lake City and ignite the skies. But, a lot of people didn't show up for Salt Lake. They're not used to football in the wintertime. And, it was real cold out and people didn't show up last week in Salt Lake in the snow. And he says, yeah, but, you got to understand, down here in Alabama, if they push it back a month, that means that the league goes from ending in May to ending in June. And I got to tell you, down here in Alabama, that is storm season. He says, April, May, June is like torrential downfall, God storm season. You know what I mean? So they'd hate to be playing in that. And as far as your March Madness goes and all that other stuff, I mean, basketball fans are basketball fans. On my way out of Alabama, I ran into a AAU coach. We talked sports for a good 20 minutes at the truck stop of America there. And, we just talked basketball. But when I listened to him talk, and I was able to talk about how I grew up, I was raised by a coach, and he coached basketball, refereed basketball forever. He coaches football now. And, we were able to talk about basketball, but I could hear the passion and the dedication to his, to his coaching degree and the level that he felt for basketball. And it's big down there as well. So, you can't compete with all the sports. You're not going to steal fans from every sports. Football is football. And it will grow. You know what I mean? Us humans are like bacteria. We grow, and football is like a bacteria. It grows. It grows on you. It does not stop growing. And the last thing I will say is the numbers for this week were not that bad. I mean, sure, it wasn't Cowboys versus Patriots numbers, but 13,300 in Birmingham. Okay, that's what I'm getting off this Draft Diamonds website. 20,800 in San Diego. That's big for a great game, by the way. And I'm sure there wasn't, other than the fans of the losing team, a disappointed guy in a seat, at that place. And you best believe their next home game is going to have just as many, if not more, after a game like that. Atlanta, Memphis today, game I was at, 10,800. I didn't think there were that many, just kind of looking around. Maybe they were all in the bathroom the entire time. But, 10,800 is pretty good, and they were pretty good crowd before and after the game in the parking lot there. San Antonio, Arizona, 9,300. So Arizona, I don't know if they've yet to crack the 10,000 mark. They're pretty laid back there in Arizona. They don't even buy cars that aren't white. It gets so hot out. They don't even like driving around. But I think the game will grow in popularity. They're going to tweak their marketing, and I think they'll be fine with a little bit of time.
Definitely. Michael, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, everybody's brought up some really good points and some aspects that I hadn't really touched on. John obviously providing a lot of the real life, getting to talk to fans and stuff is always fun to hear. But I think that one of the biggest things is this media perception and fan perception of these spring leagues. It needs to change. As soon as the AAF, one of the biggest things is we're 5 weeks in, and the AAF has proven to be a fairly good quality, but we're still seeing people, picking apart this league, like quarterbacks in the NFL don't make incomplete passes or throw interceptions or make stupid decisions. And you see the leagues, you see these fans, some of these fans just continually just crap all over the league and just try to, tear it apart at any given chance. And even if it is technically being pushed as a developmental league, I think that we also need to touch base on the fact that, make no mistake, this is a professional football league. These guys are getting paid to go out there and play and try to develop their game. They have the passion that they want to do something, more with what they have. And whether it's a second chance or whether they just want to get the reps, and get a chance to just showcase that they can play. But I think the perception's a really, really big thing when it comes to this. And the investment, the $250 million investment from Tom Dundon, there was negative press everywhere, and fans were just with negative comments constantly. And I did my best, wherever I could, whether it was articles or the group or that were in there, and trying to make a more positive spin on it. And I think that we all have to kind of do that in order to get there. The ratings for the television has been, pretty steady for the most part. It's beating out a lot of NBA games, a lot of college basketball games. And those numbers are a little slanted too, because, some people are watching through YouTube because there's so many different, streaming services that a lot of people don't get, that don't probably factor into that, into those numbers too. So, I think that the AAF is going to be building slowly. But I think for spring leagues in general, we have to change the perception, try to be more positive of the fact that we're getting football longer, than just 6 months in, 6 months off. In the off season's dead and takes forever. And I think that that's one of the biggest things that we have to do. And eventually those casual fans will come out of the woodwork and start supporting spring leagues.
Definitely. All great points, and they all make a lot of sense. And I think we all four have the same opinion of they should be able to work. But moving on now, John, talking to you. Earlier yesterday or the day before that, we had reports of the CFL talking about having players from around the world joining and playing for the Canadian Football League. Do you have any more information on that?
Yeah, Randy Ambrosie, I love this guy. I love this guy. I mean, he is great for that league. I'm talking about the commissioner there. If we don't know, he has. This is the era of CFL 2.0, as he likes to call it. He was a player, and he has been all over every level of this league for a while now. And he has generated relationships now, partnerships with 11 different nations as far as building a talent pool for the CFL and exporting the talent pool of Canada to other countries. So Austria, Austria, France, Germany, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Italy. These are some of the countries that have signed on that are currently already playing professional football, American professional football, not Canadian professional football. They play American in these other countries, but they are all now eligible for the Canadian Football League Combine. So they're getting players from all around the world. Like the NFL has their combine. It's predominantly NCAA Division I players, maybe a Division II, or I can't remember what the third division. It's like a little small division college, American. They show up to the combine, but predominantly NCAA Division I guys are going to the NFL combine, and of course the XFL, the AAF, and the CFL do show up to the combine, knowing those three leagues know that they're not really going to get much of a crack at the players that show up to there, but it's good to have notes and measurements. You got to know if he's 6'2", 8 inches and 234 and a quarter, and runs that 4.43, yada yada yada. But what Canada is doing, I think, is pretty darn impressive and intelligent, because not only are they in pretty good shape going into this next CBA that's actually happening this summer, the collective bargaining agreement in the CFL, because he can look at it from an ex-player's perspective. Okay, so he's not out for the jugular like the owners and Roger Goodell is at the bargaining table, because this guy actually played the game, okay, and played it for this league at that. And, so he can kind of, look at it from their vantage point too. It's not, the CFL's in pretty good shape financially, but to increase their talent pool, knowing that the Alliance is in town, all right. You got so-and-so the Alliance on the other corner now with their lemonade stand. Now the XFL says they're going to move in on that corner with a lemonade stand, and they're also going to sell hot dogs. Okay, so he's got to increase his talent pool. But what he does in trade says, hey, you know what? Kind of like the AAF is advertising their relationship with the NFL. You know what I mean? We got some players that can't make our 52-man roster. We'll send them over there to Germany. We'll send them over there to Austria, and they can play with you guys. You know what I mean? We'll take the some of the better players you got. They've got a job opportunity here, and in reciprocal, we ask that you do the same for us. So not only are they maintaining an interest level with these other countries, but they're also increasing their talent pool for both sides of the equation. And I think that's only great for the game of football. And I highly recommend the Alliance and the XFL take note of this and attempt to do the same thing.
Definitely. I when I saw the reports and everything, I looked at the whole, sometimes the NFL combine brings in a rugby star here and there, and they get drafted or signed by a team. Either it's from the draft or it's in the off season, and it's either they make a spot or they don't. Usually they're fullbacks. They're really nothing else. So it's good to see that the CFL is bringing in that talent and allowing them the opportunity of being able to do that, because I think, in my opinion, if we have all that talent come over there, those teams could be viable, and the CFL could make a push to be a gaining star when it comes to the NFL, XFL, and Alliance. But looking at all that, tonight we want to give you our social media handles. We want to make sure that you're connecting with us and getting our thoughts and opinions throughout the week, whether it be on stories or even the weekend on games if we post. So let's go around the corner. We're going to start with you, Michael. Give us your social media handles.
You can find me up on Facebook at Michael Washington, and my Twitter handle is at MW2AFNN. I don't have Instagram or really any other social media platforms other than those two. So,
alrighty, John.
Well, I am John Turner on Facebook, and I on Twitter. What do we got here? XLX Jack, the number 7 XLX. It's JACK, the number 7 XLX. XLX is wallpaper. XLX Jack 7 XLX on Twitter, and John Turner on Facebook. I've got an Instagram that I never use, so don't bother.
Coach.
And you can find me, the coach, at Lynn Hart Jr., LINHART Jr. on Facebook. On Instagram, you can find me at _coach28, all lowercase. And on Twitter, the coach28, all lowercase.
And you can find me on Instagram at Kevin Drake32. You can find me on Twitter at CrazyKev091. And if you really want to connect with me on Facebook, it is Kevin Drake. Granted, you're going to probably find 32 million of them, but if you know me, you know me, if you can find it. But that is our social media handles. We do encourage y'all to jump on and connect with us and get our thoughts. Kind of give us some banner. Give us your opinions on what you think. See if you disagree with anything we say. We really appreciate it, and we do hope that you jump on and do that with us so we can grow more and be more a part of our community and yours. But for the final thing that we'll talk about tonight, I was brought up a question earlier today, whether I was all in on Alliance or not. And in my strong opinion, I am. I am all in on the Alliance of American Football League because the teams, the players, the coaches, they all have really strong connections to the NFL, even though most, like the coaches have been in the NFL, whether it's players, coaches themselves. You have Rod Woodson and Hines Ward and Charlie Ebersol that have big connections in its own right, because Hines Ward being a Hall of Fame wide receiver with the Steelers and everything. This league has the potential to do a lot of different things. I've been saying this for weeks since we started this show with it. I looked at the Alliance as being as developmental. Granted, if they push hard enough, they could surpass and be their own thing. But I always saw them as kind of like the G League for the NBA. Developmental, bringing people in, giving people a chance, whether it be college recruits not making it, undrafted free agents, or if the Alliance and the NFL brought it to their attention and grew together, possibly do what NBA does. Sometimes the kids come out of high school, they jump into the G League, they prove themselves, and they jump on. Maybe they could do that with high school players for the NFL. But I'm all in. I really am. This has been a great season. 5 weeks in, we've seen everything that we could possibly see. We've seen safeties. We've seen punt returns for touchdowns and everything. This has been a really good league so far, and I do hope that they're able to push off and bring a bigger name to themselves, because they have the likes of the NFL Network, CBS, and TNT pushing out their games, along with the app that they have that gives you real-time advantages when it comes to play-by-play commentary. Play-by-play, not really commentary. They also do stuff on YouTube as well, and they also have a deal with Bleacher Report Live, even though that is still a fairly new system, so that they have it, but not many people do know about it, as John said earlier in the show. But I'm all in. I really am. But that's going to do it for tonight's show. I am your host, Kevin Drake, here with Michael, John, and Coach Lynn. And that is going to do it for us tonight. Good night and be safe.
Thank you.